Good evening, and welcome to a special episode of عنان podcast. Shot here live at Mohammed bin Salman Nonprofit City, Misk City, during the Misk Global Forum 2024. I'm very happy to be sharing this session with Yasser Khan, who is a prominent public speaking and communication coach specializing in training CEOs and executives to communicate effectively with authority and confidence. He's the CEO of Speech Coach, founder of Speak Like a CEO. Welcome, Yasser.
How many times can you say the word CEO?
CEO, I know, right? That was a mouthful.
Glad to be here.
That was a mouthful. Well, you're the CEO that trains CEOs, so it's got to be.
I got to find a few more places to add the word CEO in there just to make sure we got the CEO in there. Yeah.
That's great. Well, it's really great to have you here. I believe it's your first time in Saudi.
It is, yes.
How are you finding the experience so far?
Unlike anything I've ever experienced, right from when I got off the plane till I got to the hotel to when I got to the venue, I have never experienced this level of hospitality in my life. So I'm almost a little depressed going back home because I don't know how it'll measure up. So it's been pretty good.
That's amazing. Well, I'm not happy that you're going to be depressed going back home, but I am happy that you received that level of hospitality. Yes. That's one thing that Saudi is very well known for, and I'm glad we didn't disappoint. Mm-hmm. Where is home for you?
Toronto, Canada currently, but I grew up in Karachi, Pakistan.
Okay, yeah. Amazing. So, let's get started on that. So you grew up in Karachi, Pakistan.
That's correct.
How has that been, and how was the transition to Toronto?
Yeah, I grew up there up until the age of 18, and then my parents decided this kid's too quiet for too long. We need to get him to open up a little bit. So they sent me to Malaysia for 4 years to do my undergrad. Unfortunately, the only thing that opened up was my parents' bank account because I didn't learn anything. I just went and got a degree, came back, and I still had no skills. And then my dad said, hey, this is all the money we have left. Canada, this is my last shot. Please.
Last resort.
Please make something happen.
So wait, hold up. If I could take you back. Yeah. What do you mean they wanted, you were too quiet?
I was very shy growing up. So I was very insecure. I had self-esteem issues. I had people would make fun of my teeth and my voice. It was the squeaky voice at the time. I was very skinny. So I was just afraid of being in front of people. Not just speaking. I didn't want to be seen by anyone.
Wow.
So in my mind, if I was invisible, I was safe. I had made that connection. So the whole purpose for me was just stay away from the limelight, which is very ironic considering what I do now.
Yeah. So that was it growing up. That's the persona that you had.
Exactly.
And where was the shift? So you said Malaysia didn't help.
Yeah, it didn't help. And then when I came to Canada, I had seen just how much my parents did to put me through education, and I felt guilty. That I'm not doing anything. I'm just staying in my room. I play video games, go to class, come back, and that's it. And they were investing this money hoping that I discover some sort of a talent. And when I came to Canada, I was so lonely. I didn't have any friends. I didn't know anyone there. So I just Googled how to make friends. And the first thing that popped up was something called a Toastmasters Club.
Yes.
Now, I'm sure you're familiar with that, but at the time, I thought it was one of two things. One, a place to get a good grilled cheese sandwich, or two, people sitting in a circle talking, right?
Yeah.
And I walked in and I realized it's a public speaking club, and you will never see a person do a faster U-turn in your life. So as I'm trying to exit, the woman sees me and she says, hey, we've got a new member. Come introduce yourself.
Oh, wow.
So now in a new country, I don't know anyone there. I'm anxious. There's 36 people who are in their 50s, all white people. I'm the only ethnic person there. I introduce myself. I blank out. I have no idea what I say. And I go back and sit on my seat and I think, Yasser, this is why you never leave the house. Stay at home, continue doing what you're doing. But the woman who brought me up on stage, she introduced herself as Karen Knight. She was in charge of the club. And she said, Yasser, you're in a new country. You've never spoken to anyone before. This is your first time. Congratulations. And it was the first time someone ever saw anything in me.
Wow.
So she trained me. She took me under her wing. She helped me get better. I won some competitions. I started training. 10 years later, this is what I do for a living.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
But so you went from feeling absolute, so what was the feeling when you had to speak in front of all these people?
Just terror, but if I were to be more specific, this feeling of I'm not good enough to be seen. Where if I hide, that's where I belong. I belong in the darkness. I was so used to people making fun of me as I was growing up. I had zero self-esteem.
And it's because of braces and because of, just
kids
normal kid stuff?
Kids in Pakistan can be
or
pretty
was
brutal.
there like specific...
Yeah, I had these protruding teeth. and I had my hair was all messy all the time. And there was a time in my early days where my parents were really struggling to pay the fees and get me through school. So I would sometimes wear the same uniform multiple days. And then people could tell, hey, is this the same thing you're wearing?
Oh, God.
And then you can't really say much to that.
Yeah.
Right? So over time, you just learn to disappear to the darkness, and that's what I did.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So fear at that moment when you're speaking to people, a little bit of terror, any flashbacks of the past?
Yeah, every day.
Yeah.
Every day I step on stage, it's like a part of me is fighting
Till
with that.
now.
Yeah, that inner child you're still dealing with, because a lot of your personality is shaped from those early few years. And you can work through therapy and all that, but for me, I'm almost glad I have it, because it's this constant reminder to continue to work hard. I spent a big chunk of my life trying to figure out how to remove insecurity. But now I realize if I didn't have insecurity, I wouldn't have any of what I have in my life right now, because it's the only driver I have. It's the only pain in my life, and I want to run away from it. That's why I work so hard towards what I want. So I've made peace with it, but I still have to visit it every now and then.
You know, that's throughout the past 2 days, that's come up as a theme quite a bit from a majority of the people that I've sat with. That the drive and what propels them forward is insecurities, fears, wanting just things to be better, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't come from, and for some people it does, where it comes from, things are good and I want to change the world, but it's more of I want to change something within myself first.
Yeah, filling in some sort of gap, and when we achieve success, we hope we get some sort of validation. We now feel like we are worthy of validation from ourselves, because I believe a lot of people in public speaking say, I'm really afraid what people will say about me, think about me. I don't think that's true. I think we're afraid what we'll think about ourselves, what we think other people think about us. So it's an internal battle more than anything, I believe.
And I think it stays with a person. Like when you, for instance, if we're done with this interview and we leave, and I'm going to think about, okay, so I said this and he said that, and I'm thinking about it a little bit. I could go down the path, or if I could have done this, I could have done that. And then, you're absolutely right in that you judge yourself, and I think possibly your worst critic.
Yes, but that also helps you improve really quickly, because you're able to see flaws very, very fast. If I ask someone, hey, tell me something you don't like about your face, it'll take them less than 5 seconds to come up with a laundry list. But if I ask them, hey, what do you like about your face? It'll take them an eternity to come up with something.
Yeah.
Because I think we're trained to look for threats. We're trained to look for danger, and it's very easy to spot that. So I like to spot everything I'm insecure about, and then using that as leverage to chase my goals. It turns out to be a very effective mode for me.
Is that how you train your clients?
No. I try not to remind them of their insecurities. That doesn't make for the best coaching experience. But I do have some clients who, they'll have imposter syndrome. So a client I'm working with now, he just became the CEO of a $1 billion company, but he's never been a CEO before. But he's had a CMO role, CFO role, so he has imposter syndrome around that. Now, I can't remind him of all of his trauma, because that's not going to improve the situation.
Yeah, for sure.
So
For anybody.
Yeah.
You don't want a traumatized CEO.
My role is technically a speech coach, but my job is to know their behaviors and their mindset better than they know it themselves. So I can catch their thought patterns and then find techniques that help specifically them in that situation. And because I've been training CEOs in their most vulnerable moments, like going right on stage in front of 8,000 people, it scares them, right? I see who they truly are. I see their real personality come out, and that's how I'm able to help them, because I understand my insecurities.
Do you see it on stage when they're actually performing, or do you see it off stage through your... How does it start? How does the relationship start?
Because different people, their anxiety comes up at different times. So let's say someone comes to me and says, Yasser, I've got a keynote coming up. They might be hesitant just about the idea of stepping on stage. So I might have to convince them to do that. And then as the day draws near, you'll have two kinds of people. One, they will practice all day, every day, because they're so terrified. They don't want to mess up. The other kind are, they're so terrified, they don't even want to practice. Or they don't want to practice because once they watch themselves on video, they know how bad they are and they don't want to face that. So two different approaches for depending on the type of client. And then when it comes to the day off, what do you eat in the morning? How do you manage your energy?
To that level of details.
Everything. Because I had one person who would just completely swallow an entire bottle of Coke before stepping on stage.
Wow.
And
Wonderful jitters.
His energy would just go down. So I said, listen, you have to manage your energy, especially if you're speaking for long durations of time. So that's where all the specific techniques and knowing the client comes into play.
That's incredible. So do you spend quite a bit of time then before that with them to understand their daily habits, to understand?
Quite a bit. And they won't tell me their habits. I will find out, and then I will ask them. So I'll many of them, they will suggest things that they would like to do, and then I will ask them, why do you want to do this? So for example, I had a CEO who was going to go into a Q&A session with investors.
Okay.
And he gave me a list of 11 questions that he wanted to practice. So after we practiced those 11 questions, I said, hey, how about I throw you some other questions? He said, no, let's just do these. I said, how about I throw you some other questions? Why are you intimidated by that? And it's because he didn't want to see himself performing not at 100%. But sure enough, when he went to the pitch with the investors, some questions came in that he wasn't prepared for. So that's why it's my job, not just to do what they're asking me, but to challenge them, because words that challenge are words that change.
Do you think that people carry put on a persona of themselves through your experience in coaching CEOs? Do you feel like there's the authentic self and the person as they are, and then there's the persona of who they want others to?
The idea of authenticity, I've thought about it a lot, because what is authenticity? If you look at how you talk to your parents, your boss,
it's different.
Very, very different. So is one more authentic than the other? Probably not. It's just the same person, but looking at it from a different lens. However, I feel like when people are on stage and they feel inauthentic, it's because they're saying things they would not normally say in a way they would not normally say it. So you see people who memorize their entire script, or they speak from a teleprompter, or they read off their slides. They don't sound authentic because that's not how they would say it.
Right.
They probably didn't even write the words themselves, right?
Kind of like when I was reading the CEO intro.
Well, there you go, right? Because now your personality is shining, but you're bound by a script. You have to stick to it. So my goal is to give them a structure, talk about these 3 points, but then play around with it and find the right words. And that gets them more relaxed, more loose, and gives them just enough certainty where they have confidence in themselves to speak.
So what do you think are like the defining ingredients or characteristics maybe? Yeah, characteristics that would make, actually, I'm going to ask it this way. Do you think that there are specific characteristics in a person that would make them a good speaker naturally, or it's something like in your experience that was taught?
It's a mix of both. So I try to compare it to learning a language. You learn to speak at a very young age, not because you take a course, but because people around you speak that way. And you speak like your parents, you speak like your mom. Similarly, when you're learning a new language, you try to immerse yourself around people who speak that language and you learn faster. With public speaking, the content that you consume on a daily basis influences what you say. That's how we invent slang, right? Similarly, when you speak in a certain way, you train yourself to speak that way. So I'm very cognizant of what inputs I'm taking in and what I choose to hold on to when I'm speaking. So if you were surrounded by people who speak really well since you've grown up, you might be a very good storyteller, which, by the way, I've met a lot of in Saudi Arabia. Everyone seems to be an amazing storyteller. And if you've gone to some of the finer institutions or you've gotten training around it, now you can polish that up.
Right.
So depending on where you are in the journey, if you're not a very good public speaker, maybe you need some training first. If you already are great, find some icings on top and go to that next level.
How was it for you when you said that you started training, and remind me of your mentor's name?
Karen Knight.
Karen Knight. I remembered the Knight part, not the Karen part. So when Karen Knight was working with you and you started getting better, you started winning competitions. For the people that knew you, how was this new Yasser perceived?
It's something that I'm still experiencing because as I'm going viral on social media, some people from my middle school, elementary school, they will find my videos.
Some people that spoke about
Of course, I've grown quite a bit, and they're like, oh, this is Yasser? He's the last person I would expect to be a public speaker. In fact, if you go to my personal Facebook profile, one of the pictures you'll see is of me at a conference, and the top comment on that is the one day where Yasser said absolutely nothing. And the truth of the matter is, I went to that conference because I had a crush on a girl and I wanted to impress her.
Nice.
And she was in the same conference as me, but I was too scared to say anything.
Oh, wow.
So a complete waste of my time.
Wow.
But that comment, I still remember it because it has such a significant effect on me. I reflect on how far I've come since then, and I think it's just people find it hard to recognize that I've come this far, especially when they watch my videos. So I feel validated, but I also feel like I've proven to myself it is a skill that you can learn and not an identity that you're stuck with.
How was it for you experiencing that shift within yourself? Because you're talking about that situation with your crush,
Right.
you going, not being able to say anything or articulate or not even articulate, you know?
Yeah. Listen, rejection from women is something I'm very used to.
Yeah, no. We're not talking about rejection. We're talking about, rejection is one thing when you're able to take that first step, and then being rejected, okay, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But you being your own barrier
Right.
towards achieving something that you may have achieved had you gone after it.
You don't know if you don't know. You don't know your potential, right?
Okay.
I used to hide behind the label of introvert. It was my favorite word.
A lot of people I know do that.
So, Yasser, you want to come out? No, I'm an introvert. You want to meet my friend? No, I'm an introvert. So I would use it almost like it's a disease where I can't leave the house because I'm an introvert. And then one day someone asked me, what is your definition of an introvert? And I said, oh, someone who's afraid of people. And he said, is that a definition you give yourself every single day? Maybe you're just reminding yourself of that every single day and you're acting in accordance with that identity. What if you just change that identity? And I started to remind myself of the exact opposite. Yes, I feel anxious when I meet people, but eventually it gets better. And as I continued to do that, my beliefs started to change, and you start to accumulate proof when you're in social situations and you don't get a panic attack and you do fairly well. And people laugh at your jokes and you say, hey, I'm actually not so bad at this. You build this entire well of proof that you're good at something, and eventually you become confident. And that's what happened to me.
That's incredible. And I can only imagine how that internally feels for you. How did you go from you being a speaker to winning awards to deciding to coach people and turning it into a profession?
I feel like I jumped into the coaching part before anything else.
Yeah?
Because when I was in college, I was training other people to ace their presentations because many of the students in my class were learning English. They had some challenges with that. And then the teachers would notice, wait, he got a D in the last presentation. How did he get an A this time? What happened?
So you're doing this in college?
In college, yeah. That's where I learned it too when I came to Canada, right? So people started to notice that.
So the Toastmasters Club was part of the university.
Exactly. Okay. So I learned there, and I learned that I could change as a person, so I became so passionate about teaching it. So I started teaching public speaking, and I was speaking about speaking, just very meta. And I'm still doing that. So much of my work now is behind the curtains and teaching people who go on stage. But it's only now that I'm making the transition to being on the stage myself. Because I had a client who last minute at his event, someone pulled out. And he said, hey, Yasser, you're a public speaking coach. You can do a speech, right? I said, yeah, I certainly hope so. Can you just do the closing keynote? I said, sure. So I arrived at 7 days' notice. I did an entire keynote, and he was just in complete awe. He came to me and said, Yasser, I don't know what you're doing coaching people. You need to be on stage.
Wow.
He made some calls, and next thing you know, I'm here in Saudi Arabia, and I'm speaking to people. But now I'm trying to divest my attention from coaching and speaking. But my start was very much right from coaching.
So you mentioned here in Saudi. I hear you have a few Saudi clients.
Yes.
How is that?
Phenomenal. In fact, one of my first clients was from a organization called Seven Ventures.
Okay.
And I asked him, hey, who's someone in your region you admire? Because I want to make sure it's localized. And he says, oh, His Excellency Abdullah Al-Swahab. And I didn't know who that was. So when I looked him up in the first 30 seconds, oh my God, this person speaks in such an articulate fashion. Yeah. And then I started noticing Adil Al-Jaber and Princess Rima, and man, what is happening in Saudi Arabia? So my mind started opening up. And once I worked with him, then I got clients from the Ministry of Investment, from Saudi Leadership Society, and now it's growing and growing and growing. And I feel lucky that I've discovered them now, not 10 years later when you already have Vision 2030. Exactly.
When everyone is as articulate.
I want to be on the rocket ship, so I'm really glad I'm here when I'm here.
So you've in addition to your Saudi clients, you've coached around 2,500?
Yeah, depending on what number you want to count, workshops, course sales, one-on-one coach. Yeah, it's a lot. What do
you think are the common attributes between the leaders that you've worked with?
They're very wealthy. That's one.
Okay.
Yeah, and when they hire me, I made this mistake. They're not looking for a coach. They're looking for the best coach. Okay. Because if they're that wealthy, they're very successful, they're only looking for the best. One of the clients who had the biggest impact on me is a woman by the name of Shannon Klingman. She's the founder of a deodorant called Lumi deodorant. It's the world's first full body deodorant for women.
Interesting.
And she sought me out. She saw my videos. She got on a call with me, and I was full with clients. I didn't want to take her on. So she said, Yasser, I only want to work with you. Whatever it is, let me know. So I wanted to get rid of her. So the biggest price I could think of at the time was $5,000. So I said, hey, just so you know, I charge $5,000. And I was fully expecting her to say, what, $5,000?
Goodbye.
Exactly. But then there was silence on the other end, and she said 2 words I'll never forget. She said, that's it? Like, what do you mean? That's all you charge? And then suddenly, she was skeptical of me because of my prices. So after a while, she saw enough of my videos. She said, okay, let's work together. We worked together. She came back to me and said, Yasser, the work you and I have done, you should have charged me at least $25,000 for this. Wow. The next person you get on a call with, do not say a number under $25,000.
So she just
I'm thinking,
quadrupled your market
value. Are you kidding me? Who's going to pay $25,000? Well, sure enough, top CEOs, they'll pay $25,000.
So what do you think are the possibly three most important lessons for the CEOs
to improve their speaking?
To improve their speaking, yes.
Well, practice is number one, and you'd be shocked how many people don't know the difference between practice and prep. So preparation is putting the slides and the material together, which, by the way, most people do it the day off or the night before.
Right.
Practicing is saying the words out loud the way you would say it on stage. Almost no one does it. Almost no one. Not in corporate, not when they're stepping on stage. Because I feel like people have this belief that I communicate every day. I talk about this all the time. I'm pretty good at this. But if you just say the words out loud, start to finish 10 times, you will be amazed how big of a difference it will make.
I think some people feel like, guilty as well, but it's that it becomes scripted in a way. If I keep saying it out loud, then it's scripted. Then I might, if I do it again on stage, I might lose my momentum. I might lose the glamorous.
Yeah, so there's a difference between memorizing and internalizing.
Okay.
Internalizing is you walk around and you say it like it's a conversation. You don't have to memorize the words. You just have to memorize the order. So an analogy I give, if I ask you what you ate today, you can tell me for breakfast I ate this, for lunch I ate this, for dinner. You don't have to memorize exactly what vegetable was on the plate, right? Similarly, with your story and your speech, you just know the order of it, and then you can riff off of that. So I tell people, when you're rehearsing, just say it out loud the way you would say it in a conversation. When you memorize word for word, then it creates pressure because it turns into a performance. When it turns into a performance, you're not in the moment. You're thinking, I hope I remember what I said. I hope I remember that line. What's on paragraph 2?
What was that word?
Exactly. And then it's about you and not them. That's why you focus on internalization, not memorization. That's a big difference in the rehearsal process.
That's incredible.
You can take it in for a minute. It's okay.
I can take it in for a minute. No, I was thinking about how I read something once that was talking about visualizing the setting in which you're sitting as well. Yeah. So it's, closing your eyes. Okay, I'm getting up on stage. This is me going through the motions to kind of reduce the anxiety that you would have from doing it as well. So that's one thing that always stuck with me. It's like, okay, it is a conversation. Like you said, it's visualizing that conversation as well.
Or if you want to think about this in a concept, the more uncertainty you reduce, the more confidence you introduce.
Okay.
If you are familiar with the situation, it is inherently less scary. So an analogy I'll give you. I use a lot of analogies, you've noticed.
I love it.
If you watch a horror movie the first time, every time there's a jump scare, you will be scared. But what about the 10th time you're watching it?
Yeah.
You know where everything happens.
Or you reduce the volume.
Exactly, right? Or if you go and watch a movie and you don't know it's a horror movie, you might be even more scared, right? So with public speaking, how can you reduce as much uncertainty as possible? Can you check out the venue? Can you see how you'll be walking around? How many people are there? Can you rehearse it on stage? If you reduce that uncertainty, so by the time you're on stage, you practice in as close a setting as possible that you feel confident that you can do it again because you've done it before.
Amazing. So practice is one thing.
Yes.
What else?
Then it's the polish. How do I tell a story in a way that's memorable? So a big distinction that I learned, I talked about that shortly earlier, the difference between being a great speaker and a memorable speaker is a very big difference. A great speaker is, oh, what amazing words you use. You use your body language like this, and you have such a great poise. All of those things are about me and how I carry myself. But what am I trying to do when I speak? I'm trying to deliver a message. If you remember how I spoke, but you don't remember what I said, aren't we losing the point of communication? Right. So you can be the worst public speaker in the world. You can have ums and uhs. You can have very poor English. But if people remember you, then your message got across. And I'll give you a perfect analogy of this. In Toastmasters, I was doing a workshop, and I used to bring people up to the front, and I'd give them an impromptu question, right? Just to get them going. There was a woman who would attend. She would sit right at the back, not say anything, and she would leave. But she would keep coming back. She came back the first time, sat at the back, second time, sat at the back, third time, where do you think she sat? Right at the back. So then I thought, okay, maybe she needs that extra push. So I said, hey, I've seen you here before. Why don't you come on up?
Come on to the front.
Yeah, come on up, right? And she slowly made her way there. Everyone's clapping. And I was immature at the time, so I said, tell me about the last person you kissed. That's your question. So she went to the front of the stage, and she's looking dead on the floor. Mm-hmm. So I sat down. I said, okay, she's a little anxious. 10 seconds pass, 15 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds.
Oh, my heart's beating just thinking about that.
The tension you would have felt in that room. I'm looking around and people are looking at me as if to say, hey, you
need to do something about get her out of the situation.
So as I'm getting up, she finally looks up and says, well, my last kiss would have been to my grandma right before she passed.
Allah.
And then she just sat back on her seat. And the thing is, it's been 10 years. I don't remember a single speech from that entire year, but I remember that one single sentence because it made me feel something in that moment.
That's insane.
So do you want to be a good speaker or a memorable speaker? It can take only one sentence to do that.
That is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Oof. So that's one memorable moment that you've had with someone that came organically, I guess, from the audience. What's one memorable moment or, something as powerful as that you've seen from one of your clients?
I had a client, his name is Hussein Salem. He's the CEO of Ohana Development in Abu Dhabi.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a real estate developer. So he flew me out to Abu Dhabi. He said, hey, you have a big event coming up. It's an inaugural speech. I want to make sure I do a good job. But we had very few days. I think we have 6 days, and I had to travel there too. So I came to Abu Dhabi, and I didn't know a whole lot about him. I just knew he was in real estate. When I showed up to the venue, it was this palace inside Abu Dhabi, and there were all of these billionaire real estate investors there, these royalty. I'm like, where am I? What is this place? I felt so small in that moment, and he's just getting carried away. He's talking to people. He's greeting it because he's the speaker of the day, right? And everywhere I find 5 minutes, hey, practice the intro, practice the ending, practice this. I'm just trying to get him to practice. And eventually he steps on stage and he does an amazing job. And I almost get emotional just watching him do it because usually I'll train people virtually and I'll never see them on stage. But here I flew out and I saw him. But you would think that would be the most memorable moment. After it wrapped up, you had all these celebrities on stage taking pictures with him. I'm wrapping up my stuff and I'm leaving, and he calls out to me. He says, hey, Yasser, come, let's take a picture. So I go on stage. There's about 600 people in the audience, all these celebrities. I get on stage, and before he takes a picture, he looks at me dead in the eye and says, Yasser, thank you for flying out here. I don't think I could have done this without you.
Wow.
I think I almost cried in that moment on stage. It's the first time I had ever seen a CEO deliver the presentation that he worked on, but it was also the first time I saw someone at that level publicly recognize me for something. And it's those words that you say that linger with people long term. And that's why I remember his name, I remember his company, and enough to still tell you about him.
That is absolutely beautiful. And I think, and I don't know about you, but that's one of my favorite traits in people who, make it to the top or are on their way to further success as well, even if they are at the top, that humbleness and that ability to show gratitude to the people that are around them as well. That's incredible. Yeah. So in your experience, so we covered, we said we wanted 3 things. So we said the first one was practice.
Right.
The second one was
being memorable.
The third.
The third one as well.
Yeah, if you can.
Sound bites. A soundbite is a short phrase that people remember. So you might have seen me say this in some of my videos. You might have seen me say this earlier today. If you say something that's short enough for people to remember and pass on, they might forget the rest of your speech, but they will remember that one sentence. So I'll give you an example. Are you familiar with Martin Luther King?
Yes, of course.
What's the one phrase that comes to mind? The first thing that comes to mind.
What was
Something about having a dream.
I had a dream.
Exactly.
Yes, there
Now,
we go.
when you ask most people that, that's what they'll say.
Right.
But then I'll ask, tell me one single sentence from the rest of the speech.
No, nothing.
If you think of Neil Armstrong, first man on the moon.
Yes.
One small step for man, one
One
giant leap for
step for
mankind.
mankind.
But that was a very long transmission.
Yeah.
What was the rest of it? No one has any idea. So when most people listen to a speech or they listen to an interview, they remember one single sentence out of that. And if you want to really take yourself to the next level, have a deck of these one sentence, one-liners that you drop in your stories. You tell a story and then you make a point. You tell a story and then you make a point. And then people will forget everything, but they will remember your message. And that's how you become memorable with soundbites.
So I've seen it in people's interviews. So because I sit with people and converse with them, so I do a little bit of prep before that.
Yeah.
The difference between preparation, practice. I'm more on the prep than the practice, and I find that to a certain extent, it becomes repetitive. So I've seen someone say the same quotes again and again.
Yeah.
Say the same phrase again and again.
Yeah.
And personally, I don't know if this is,
Again and again the same interview or?
No, not in the same interview.
Okay.
Across different interviews. So
Right.
it's you're looking at the same person across different interviews because you're trying to see different styles and whatever.
Yeah.
They would mention, for instance, the same statistic in every single interview.
Right.
They would mention the same catchphrase in every single interview.
Right.
So it kind of, how do you differentiate between, how do you make it so that it doesn't become repetitive?
Yeah.
And it's maintaining those sound bites and maintaining the relevance, but at the same time,
It's a very good and nuanced question. So I've thought about this a lot. If you think about a public speaker or CEO doing interviews like a comedian, they spend years writing one giant hour. They practice the jokes in different clubs. They come up with a perfect hour. And guess what they do? They do the same thing over and over again. When Taylor Swift comes out with an album, do you think people complain about listening to the same song for the 10th time? They don't, right? But for us, when you're speaking on stage, every time you have an interview, you have a new audience who might not have heard that, who might not know who you are. And if you look at advertising, it's repeated messaging. How many times do you see the same ad over and over again?
Just do it.
And if you don't want to buy it, you don't buy it. But the people who do buy it, they need that repetition. So for me, I have certain business coaches whose videos I'll go back and watch because we need to be reminded more often than we need to be told of new things because we forget so often. So if you're not saying the same thing the exact same way, you change up the words here and there, but you have the essence of it, that's great. But also keep in mind, it's not the same person watching all of your interviews. So if you treat it like a comedy special, like a music album, use it in as many places as possible. Just don't memorize it word for word.
No, I love that advice.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I stalk people just before the.
Yeah, you're a fan, right? So you've seen the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So if I were starting out in public speaking, I would love to be a public.
You
speaker.
already have. I believe, yeah.
I would love to be a public speaker. If I'm not a CEO, right? Because our audience is youth. If I'm not a CEO and I'm starting out and I want to be known as a public speaker, what are some practical first steps that I can take? Both in terms of the type of content that I'm talking about and the practical skills that I need to develop prior to getting up on stage.
Just to make sure I understand your question, they want to get into the profession of public speaking or just get better? Okay, they want to be a full-time speaker.
Yes.
Okay. Just a quick caveat, I'm not the best person to ask because I'm more of a trainer, but based on what I know about the industry, you have to be known for something that is unique to you. And this is the best piece of advice I got. You're familiar with Simon Sinek?
Yes.
I hired his brand consultant. And the best thing he told me to do was, don't try to be better than someone else, try to be different. If I Google your method, you're the only one who should pop up. So for example, if you Google start with why, the only person who will pop up is Simon Sinek. If you have the 5-second rule, Mel Robbins, she's the only person who will pop up. So if you are going into speaking, don't go into the speaking venue being a commodity, talking about something everyone's talking about. Sure, you can talk about health, wealth, and fitness, but You have a unique story, a unique mechanism, a unique phrase that people can find you with. First, develop that. And then think about who are your customers. If you are going into corporate speaking, your message has to appeal to corporate. If you're talking about how to quit your 9 to 5 and vlog for the rest of your life, I don't know how appealing that will be to a corporate audience. So create that message, a unique mechanism, then say, hey, if a CEO of a company or VPs listen to this, can they see this as a brand new idea that they can implement company-wide? Develop that, work on the material, try it out for free in a couple of places, work on it a lot like a comedian. Next thing you know, someone wants to pay you to get on their stage.
I love that. That's incredible advice. Thank you so much for that. And I think that would be a great place to close off our conversation. Thank you. Is there anything else you want to add, Yasser, before we sign off?
Follow me on Instagram, like and subscribe, YouTube channel, speaklikeaceo.com. That's my website. That's about it.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Pleasure.